We're on. Okay, thank you. All right, I call the meeting to order, please, at 1 o'clock. We do have one addition to the agenda. It's under item 21.1, which is an open public meeting. We want to add to that meeting, it says redevelopment charges bylaw. We're also adding read the Dennis subdivision agreement. Are there any other additions to agenda? Okay, then we can confirm that, please. I need a mover and a seconder to confirm today's agenda. That looks like Scott and Pat, thank you. All in favor? Okay, carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? I see none. Will be noted. Presentations and delegations. Our friend is here. Richard is going to give us our audited financial statements review. Nice to see you again, Richard.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. I will lead you through an ideally quick summary of the audited financial results for the year ended December 31st, 2018. And to do that, I will run through a PowerPoint presentation that we have developed. Most people find this a little more entertaining and easier to read than the financial statements, so I will go through that. First off, within the presentation is a summary of the independent auditor's report, and that is our report on the financial statements that, in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the township of Hamilton at December 31, 2018, and the results of its operations and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So that is your clean, unqualified auditor's report. A couple things to point out here. First off, it does say consolidated, so the numbers we're going to look at include the township and the results of operations too from the municipal animal shelter. And then as well too, it's prepared in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, more commonly known as PSAB, which are not your standard commercial type accounting policies, so I will try to point out the differences there as we go through. And then finally, the auditor's report, although presented here, is only one paragraph within the actual full draft statements. The auditor's report is now a two-page document as a result of changes to the Canadian auditing standards requiring a new and improved auditor's report, but the content, the main content and the way we audit is still the same, and you still get a clean auditor's report. Next, taking a look at just some audit procedures we run through. So this is a summary of the audit reporting letter that we have provided. But that was intentional. It's hard to hold people to something if they don't, if it's not recorded. So then this would be a summary of our audit reporting letter. Describe some of the audit procedures we do, including review of minutes, actually doing sample testing, and of course we audit on a test basis. We don't look at every transaction, and we do various types of sampling and analytical review and review of management estimates, and then as well to take a look at all your financial systems as well. And then just a quick update as to where we're at. In the audit process, the audit is complete pending council approval of the financial statements, receipt of the signed letter of representation that we have provided, and the receipt of the legal letter that we get from your solicitor. Overall, there were no significant difficulties encountered during the course of our audit, no changes to our initial audit plan or disagreements or difficulties with management and excellent cooperation from them. For 2018, there were a few new accounting standards brought in by PSAB this year, and they are noted in the detailed financial statements, but they did not create any changes for the main set of statements. They did for the board statements. There was just some additional disclosure there. And the schedule of unadjusted differences, there were no items on that, so you have a clean schedule there. So everything that we found or differences that we did find were adjusted by your staff. That is a summary of kind of the audit process. Now we will look at some numbers. First, we take a look at the financial assets. So your financial assets are items that are either cash or ideally will be turned into cash. Overall, you will see between your cash and investments, there was a decrease between the 2 years, a bit of a flip between cash and investments, but as well too with the amount of capital done this year, you basically converted your cash assets into tangible capital assets. But still, you're still sitting in a fairly healthy position there as well. Accounts receivable, the amounts that others owe you. With all your capital work, you had a fair bit of HST outstanding from the federal government, as well too from monies from developers and some monies from grants from the federal government for Gore's Landing and things such as that. Taxes receivable, there was a nice decrease year over year, and as you can see, you're at the best level you've been at in the last 5 years, so that's very good to see. And when you take a look at your level of total taxes receivable compared to your total amount you bill, you're down to 6%, which is a very good rate. To be in the low risk range, the province suggests 10%, so you're doing well there, and you brought it down from 7.9% in the prior year, so that's very good. So in total, you had $7.4 million in financial assets, and the next page then just provides a graphical depiction of that. Next, we come to financial liability, so these are the amounts that you owe to others. Overall, there was an increase within the payables this year as a result of some holdbacks still outstanding on capital projects, as well as some payroll accruals and tax credits, tax prepayments being higher than the prior year. So those are some of the changes related to the accounts payable. Your deferred revenue went down. That represents the use of some development charges in the year for capital projects. And so the amount of money within there is mainly development charges and a bit of parkland money left. And deferred revenue just represents grants that you've received that you haven't spent yet. The main one this year is the AMO Main Street funding, and then you have a small amount there for employee future benefits, and you do not currently have any long-term debt. And then next is a graphical depiction of that. And then the balance of the statement of financial position shows your non-financial assets. So these are assets that you own, that you use, and do not normally turn into cash, so that they are used for providing services. And as you can see, the value of your tangible capital assets did go up from the previous year. So your additions were higher than your amortization on those. And then next we come to consolidated statement of operations, just a quick little look there of your total revenues versus your total PSAB expenses. And as you can see there, for PSAB you did have an annual deficit in the budget column, but then when you look at the reconciliation down below, you can see that the numbers do come back to being a zero amount, which for your tax rate budget, you budget to zero, so those numbers just show the reconciliation of those items back. And then as well too, under the actual, you can see how you come back to where things are at, as well as coming down to zero with moving some monies to and from reserves, and to an increase as well too in your operating surplus, which we'll see a little later on. Next is a quick summary of your accumulated surplus to tangible capital assets. This graph here shows that how those amounts have changed overall. The main thing you should want to remember from this graph is the orange bar should always be higher than the blue bar, so that you have more equity than just what's tied up in your capital assets, so that showing that you do have reserves and such. And then we come to the revenues and expenses and annual surplus. And as you can see there, revenues and expenses are the two major items, and the brown bar is the annual surplus or deficit, and that will vary each year depending on where you're at with capital grants and where you are with your amortization of assets. It's still a very small amount in comparison to your revenues and your expenses. Next we come to the actual revenues for the year shown comparison to budget. Very, very close both on property taxation and user charges. And keep in mind when we say user charges, it includes your fees for water, your building permits, all your recreation fees, fees generated from the municipal animal shelter, being less than $1,000 off budget to actual. That's very good budgeting there. Same with your property taxation, provincial and federal grants, up from the prior year due to some OCIF funding, as well as money from the federal government for the Forest Landing. The municipal grants that all represent your partner's share in the municipal animal shelter. And then as well too, you used $342,000 in gas tax for Minfie Road, and development charges you used for the Sandstone and the parkland. Those amounts were utilized for the Baltimore playground equipment. And then as well too, you had a loss of disposal, so as I mentioned, you did complete a lot of capital projects, but then some of those capital that you did replace, there was some net book value left. So, and unfortunately, when you replace a road, you don't get any proceeds for what was left there. So therefore, if there was some amortization left, it just automatically becomes a loss. But, nothing you can do management-wise to address any of that. It's just a function of the accounting process. And then next is a summary of the revenues in a pie chart, sorry. And as usual, the property taxes are your major source of revenue. Next we come to the financial activities on your expense side of things. So these numbers include amortization and do not include any capital additions. Broken down by the functional categories used in the financial information return. Overall, thank you. So this shows your budget to actual and prior year on expenses, and you were below budget, including the fact too that amortization was about $100,000 higher than budget. So general government too, most places have seen an increase in 2018 in those costs, even just due to the election. Protection services includes fire, police, in your case the municipal animal shelter, as well as building inspections as well, and emergency services, transportation services, all across the board. We're seeing increases there over budget, mainly due to the fact of the cost of maintaining your roads in the winter. Winter control costs were higher everywhere. Environmental services includes your water operations, and slightly below budget there. And then rec and cultural services includes all your recreational facilities, your contributions for library, things such as that, and planning and development. Fairly consistent with the prior year and slightly under budget. So good job of staying within your budgeted amounts there. And then next is just a pie chart showing the compositions thereof. And then the next graph just gives you a breakdown of your expenses based on the type of expenses. And as you can see there, the amortization was about $98,000 higher than budgeted. So, and you, like most municipalities, salaries and benefits are the largest component, as that's how you deliver your services. And then a pie chart for that as well. And then we come to what I consider to be the important slide of all of this. So your accumulated surplus. Back previously, your total accumulated surplus showed as $56 million, which, if you recall back, you don't have that much in your financial assets. This slide then shows you why that is. Of your $56 million in accumulated surplus, $51 million of it is tied up in your tangible capital assets. So there's your idea. It's just basically the balance of that is left for you to use moving forward and operate the municipality. Being your reserve and your reserve funds, you can see that they were at about $6.2 million in 2017 and did come down to about $9.3 million. And as I said, you converted a lot of your liquid assets into tangible capital assets, since you added about $4 million in capital during 2018. And as well, too, certain things like under the surplus deficit, you'll see there the township at the end of 2017 had a surplus of around $270,000, and that did increase to $314,000 at the end of the year. And the waterworks operations their deficit is coming down. And then as well, too, you still have some surplus in your hydrant area charges. So although you do have $56 million in surplus, $51 million of it is tied up in your capital. Just keep that in mind. And then next, of your almost $5 million in reserve and reserve funds, you will see just a 5-year history of that four-year history of that over the last few years, because the reserves and the way they were changed back from 14 to 15, we just provided a 4-year comparison of that. As you can see, they do roads and general government and other are your largest composition there. And then the next slide just provides you some additional detail on the $4 million in your capital additions during the year, majority of which is relates to roads and bridges and rebuilding both roads as well as redoing culverts and stuff within those roads. Within buildings, you'll see that the majority of that relates to the sand dome. Land improvements, majority of that relates to the work done at Gore's Landing, as well as playground equipment. And as well, vehicles and equipment relates to a pumper and a snowplow acquired. Next, you'll see your additions to capital assets versus the amortization over time. See, it does, depending on which projects are going and what funding might be available, the graph does switch between additions and amortization as to which one's higher. And then finally, the tangible capital assets showing the average useful life and how much is depreciated and how much is not amortized, broken down between the various components there. As you can see, I feel like most municipalities, roads and bridges are the ones that are most amortized. And then next is the 5-year trend on your net financial assets, and you can see there that It has varied a bit over the years based on when you've done a lot of capital. So if you recall back in 2015, the orange bar a couple slides back was there's a lot of capital, so we dipped a bit, and same in 2018 as well. So, but still, you're still in the black above the line. So if you were below the line, the graph does turn red, so you're still in the black. So that's always a good sign. So that's where the municipality finished off at the end of the year. I wasn't sure if you have any specific questions on that.
Thank you. Members of council, questions from anyone? Comments? Must have explained it very well.
All right. Okay, good. And then the rest of the document just gives you a quick comparison of how you might fare to some others we've selected there. So it's in the package for you to take a look at. So if you want me to go through it, if not, then we can go through it at your leisure.
Thank you. Any staff comments? Apparently not. Yes, Mark.
It's nice to see that our staff, again, did a great job in keeping our budget in line throughout the year. And our budget isn't really big, so I mean, a few thousand here and a few thousand there, and we could end up in a deficit. So kudos to our staff.
And that's across the board, Mark. All of the departments were like, within just a few dollars of their budgeted areas, so. Yes, Pat?
Yeah, I wanted to echo Mark's comments about it's nice to have such a positive looking audit and to know that the hard work of our staff helped with that. My separate question though is this presentation wasn't included in our package. Am I correct? So can we get a copy of it sent to us? I'd like to see the comparator.
You have it, Paul?
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
And through to the mayor, just to thank Richard and Baker Tilly for their audit services this year again, and just to highlight that they did provide us with again an unqualified opinion about of the review of our financial statements, which is the same as last year, but again, it's important to note that that's the status and the review that we received from our chartered accounting firm. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, just to confirm what two members of council said already, that your staff did a really good job keeping everything in line and staying within your constraints as well. And you got a lot done. You're still sitting in a good financial position, so and your taxes level of taxes receivable remain very good. So a nice improvement over the years. So good job there.
Once again, thank you. See you Thursday. Okay, I thought we should. So I believe we should have a motion, please, mover and seconder to accept the financial statements as presented by our auditor. Moved by Pat, seconded by Larry. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Public hearings, we have none. Planning bylaws, we have none. Minutes of the regular council meeting held May 21st, 2019. Need a mover and a seconder, please, that the minutes of that regular council meeting held May 21st be adopted. Moved by Mark, thank you. Seconded by Pat. Any discussion? All in favor? Sorry, Larry, did you have discussion? You're good? Okay. All in favor then of the motion? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held June 11th. Mover and seconder, please, that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held June 11th be approved. Moved by Larry, seconded Scott. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. What is this business? sorry, there is business arising from previous minutes then. 9.1, the Citizens Council of Hamilton Township's presentation. A request regarding citizen comment and question periods at council meetings. We need a mover and a seconder that council direct the clerk and the CAO to bring forward a report regarding the Citizens Council of Hamilton Township presentation at Committee of the Whole, meeting June 11th, 2019, and that their request to include citizen comment and question periods at council meetings. The mover, please. Larry, Pat, discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you again. Excuse me. We have a whole list of committee reports. We have to do them separately, apparently. Minutes of the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting held May 22nd. Mover and seconder that the minutes of that Heritage Advisory Committee meeting held May 22nd be received for information. Moved by Larry, seconded Scott. Discussion? Yes, Pat?
Question? There's an item that says Wolf Tower to be deferred to next meeting. What is Wolf Tower? Is it a place I'm not aware of, or?
Possibly. It was also a place I wasn't aware of.
Wow.
It's out near Tower Manor, and it was a topic brought up by the Lander family, but because of a death in that family, the discussion has been deferred for a period of time until the remaining brother might be able to advise us of what Wolf Tower is, what it did, and where exactly it was located.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion? It's carried. 10.2, mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Cold Springs Park Advisory Committee meeting held May 7th, 2019 be received for information. Moved by Larry, seconded Mark. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. 10.3, a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting held May 28th, 2019 be received for information. Moved Pat, seconded Larry, thank you. Discussion on that? All in favor? Carried. A mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority full board meeting held May 16th be received for information. Did I skip one? Yep. I'm so sorry. That the minutes of the Joint Animal Control Municipal Services Board meeting held April 4th, 2019 be received for information. Sorry about that. Moved by Mark, seconded by Larry. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. And now the minutes of the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority meeting held May 16th be received for information. Moved by Mark, seconded Pat. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Public Works Infrastructure, 11.1. We received a report, re the heavy-duty three-quarter-ton pickup truck. We need a mover and a seconder to that report regarding the one new 2018 or 2019 heavy-duty three-quarter-ton extended cab four-wheel drive pickup truck be received for information. Moved Scott, seconded by Mark. Thank you. Any discussion on this one? All right, Pat? All in favor? Carried. Tender PW 2019-04. We need a mover and a seconder that that report regarding tender award for tender PW 2019-04, paving and drainage improvements of various roads within Hamilton Township be received, and further, that the Council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. 1, that council award the tender PW 2019-04 for paving and drainage improvements of various roads within Hamilton Township to Drain Brothers Excavating Limited at a value of $910,130 plus HST. And further, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and execute the agreement and all things necessary to execute that contract. Mover, please. Thank you, Pat. Seconded, Larry. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. 11.3, a mover and a seconder that report PW 2019-13 regarding a speed limit reduction for Sutter Creek Drive be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. 1, the council approves the reduction of speed on Sutter Creek Drive to 50 kilometers per hour, and a bylaw be prepared for consideration. And 2, that staff be directed to post the appropriate signage as required. Moved by Larry, seconded by Mark. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. Corporate Services. 13.1, Site Plan Agreement. Why do I keep crossing those off? I'm sorry. Crossing them off before I got to them. It's 2 in a row. Rec and Facilities. Report P&R 2019-08. We are downtown revitalization, Hamlet Gateway signage. How could I miss this one? We need a mover and a seconder that report P&R 2019-08 regarding community gateway signage be received into the council of the Township of Hamilton and acts as follows. 1, that council authorizes the manager of parks and facilities to proceed with version number 4 of the proposed gateway signage samples attached to the report PR 2019-08 for the communities within Hamilton Township. Have a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor. Yes, Pat, seconded by Larry. Do we have discussion? Any questions for Trevor? Oh. Scott, I'll make the call. Scott.
First of all, I'll advise I have no history, no talent, no knowledge of what's a good sign, a bad sign, a paint color, or anything else. So I have a couple of questions. How did we get to version 4? Who chose version 4? I kind of forget this.
So it was brought to coordinators.
Yep.
A couple of versions. We took some comments from that, provided it back to our graphic designer. We shared that with senior staff and with the Heritage Advisory Committee for comments. Them comments went and we basically selected from their staff, selected from the comments the fourth version.
Okay, my real question, because I was part of all of that, including Heritage, my real question is, from a ability to read this at moving traffic speed, where we see Hamilton Township in each of version 3 and version 4, is it not clear for everyone's eyes when we have that darker background in comparison to a lighter background in version 4? Like, I'm having trouble visualizing how we're going to see Hamilton Township on version 4.
And that was the comments received. It was about 50-50 on the blue background and the off-white background. I think that the Hamilton Township does stand out more on the dark blue. That wasn't in consideration of the process until you just brought that up now, but we can go.
The concern I have is the darker the color, the more the fade, the less durability probably due to solar rays. So I wonder if the font or the thickness of the letters or whatever the right terminology might be changed in version 4 to the words Hamilton Township. And that's the only conclusion I get to, considering no talent whatsoever. And I throw that out there as a question for anybody that got knowledge on this.
Do you think?
I'm not a graphic designer, but we can send that back and see if there's something else, whether it's a font or a color.
Yeah, just a
that
dark
would-
color.
That would.
Yes,
change
Larry.
it.
I have 40 years experience.
There we go.
The blue one would be better. Probably the less dirty, of course, is the dust coming off the roads. But the other issue that I had was, I think this is the one that I left. Oh, sorry. This one here, I think version 3 would be much better for readability. And I think what we should do is Hamilton Township should read Township of Hamilton, so that's consistent throughout. And also that it could be set in a semi-bold font, same font, but semi-bold. And it might have to go to a condensed version, but it could be tried that way, but I think it should read Township of Hamilton rather than Township. And other than that, I think number 3 is better for readability. That's my thought.
And we are the Township of Hamilton. That is our official title, I
Yeah.
believe. Right, so that would make sense. Yes, Pat?
Okay, well, my first comment was the same as Scott's for that sign 4. It was even just a change of color. I'm not fussy either way, like whether it's 3 or 4. I like them both, but I feel like the 4th one might stay looking good longer. The other thing I was trying to figure out though is how big are these signs? When we're talking about what you're actually going to be able to read, if the sign's this big compared to, like 5 feet wide, it may show up very clearly. Do we know the width of them?
I don't have the exact dimensions at this point.
Did you have a thought in your head?
Yeah, my thought is, and it's hard to say, like, to me, 8 feet standing here seems like a big sign, but when you put it out there, 8 feet isn't that big, so I'm looking at that kind of 8 feet by maybe 30 inches high or something like that.
Okay, so I think that they might not be as much of a problem, but it's a darker color would be good. In terms of the Hamilton Township and Township of Hamilton thing, I understand that everything is like legally Township of Hamilton, but most people say I live in Hamilton Township, so I kind of like it the way it is.
I'm just going to let Mark in, Larry, then I'll come back to you.
I'm not bothered either way, whether it's Hamilton Township, Township or Hamilton. Personally, I like the blue one a little better, just that the Cold Springs comes out better. And I think that's really what we want to advertise on these signs, because we do have Township of Hamilton signs already out there within our borders. So I'm quite happy with the version 3 versus version 4. To me, just looks a little washed out, and I think it'll just get more washed out as time goes on.
You're up, Larry.
Okay, just so that you understand, from a branding aspect, the name of the township should be consistent on all communication. There's so much confusion between Hamilton Township and the Township of Hamilton.
The city of
Until
Hamilton.
you standardize the wording, you're going to get confusion. Because we get referred to Hamilton Township as part of Hamilton, Ontario, so many times. So I think if we're going to be consistent in branding, we should be the Township of Hamilton. You can't even see that. So the symbol is very difficult to read, but I think we've got to try to, so that all people can understand that all these different villages and hamlets are the Township of Hamilton. So that version 3 color-wise, and with the change to Township of Hamilton, I think is the way we should go. That's my case.
If there's, go ahead, Pat.
I'm not like concerned either way, whether it's Township of Hamilton or Hamilton Township. I just know that I tend to say Hamilton Township. Out of curiosity question, do we know what year it's going to end up being? Circa what?
No, we had discussions about that. I don't know if we have all that information or something. I would like to have
That's
Kate can speak to that.
Just speaking with some of the members of the Heritage Committee, that municipal government was established in 1850 and thereabouts. But the hamlets themselves, if you're going to put a date on, then the hamlets themselves, you'd have to do research to find out when exactly they were established. So we felt, they suggested just leave that off. It's more important you're drawing people to the community's name.
That would allow you to enlarge in the Township of Hamilton at the bottom as well. Yes, Mark?
I guess my question would be is, do we need to have we have, it's been mentioned, we have Township of Hamilton at the top, and then we have Hamilton Township at the bottom. Do we need that double whammy on these? Because, I mean, really, we're trying to do I thought we were trying to do like the Cold Springs and the Baltimores and so forth that we want people to see. So is it possible to maybe make our logo a little bigger so that it's seen there? Or do we take the logo right off and just leave the Hamilton Township or Township of Hamilton underneath? I'm not so sure we need it twice on the same sign. So I don't know what other people's thoughts are, but that's kind
Yeah.
of,
It would maybe let you make the insignia at the top bigger, bolder.
and then it would go to Larry's point where you get the Township of Hamilton and you have your logo there.
The only comment I have is that the symbol with the circle is very hard to read, and it's almost unreadable. Even on the truck, it's not
Bigger.
defined. So that we can establish a branding of where we are, readability is essential, I think. So I think we should keep Township of Hamilton as a font below the Cold Springs. Just my opinion.
Well, I'd like to, we need to back up for sure, because we have a motion on the floor, which is to proceed with version number 4, and I'm gathering from the conversation that that's not the version that council is looking at. So we also are talking about removing the date. So I believe it was Pat, moved by Pat and seconded by Larry. Would you like to, could we revise the motion, or do we need to defeat this motion and make a new one?
So I'm willing to amend it.
Well, you just defeat it and then
Okay.
start over, because it's easy, right?
We can do either.
Can I withdraw it? Doesn't matter.
Okay. I'm getting the expert opinion that we should have a quick vote, and then we can bring another motion forward. So, all in favor of the motion? The motion is defeated. There's a surprise.
Okay, I'll try
Now,
again.
could we have another motion? Is
I will
Pat
try
allowed to do
again.
this again?
I'm sure. I don't know if it'll go through or not, but I'm willing to try. I'll make a motion that we use version number 3, that we remove Hamilton Township from the bottom, that we remove Circa 2018 from the bottom, that we increase the size of the logo instead.
Do we have a seconder? Yes, Mark. For discussion? Would you like to add something, Arthur? Go ahead. This is
Can I just
important.
clarify, may I clarify one thing with council? I just heard some great discussion, which is the purpose of bringing this forward in this manner, so thank you for that. I thought I heard 2 comments. One was around remove Hamilton Township or recompose it as Township of Hamilton with a narrow bold font at the bottom and removing the date.
So, may I respond?
Yes.
Then we had the discussion of do we need it in 2 places, and if we're only having it in one, and we can enlarge the logo, I like the idea of the enlarged logo.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, Scott.
As stated earlier, I don't have any talent, but I do have an opinion.
We're in agreement then, me too.
And for me to do this, I think I'd like to do it in stages. And the first thing I would like to do is get rid of the date, the circa 2018. I think maybe we're all in agreement on that. I think maybe we might be all in agreement to keeping Township of Hamilton in a slightly modified font, larger letters, bolder print, whatever the terminology is. And then I would leave the balance of number 3 as is, unless I had an opportunity to work the logo a little bigger, and I might consider that. But otherwise, the words would stay the same. Circa's gone, Hamilton Township gets replaced with Township of Hamilton. And I think that's where I am in this, albeit your motion on the floor isn't going to be able to be supported by myself in my summary.
So that we are clear, I mean, I'd like to see it come back, and even if we went that way with Pat's motion, I'd like to see the sign come back, to see what it does look like, if we can enlarge that logo big enough. And if we can't, I mean, it may not be feasible to do that, so we may have to stick with the Township of Hamilton on the bottom side and keep the logo at a small size. So I'd like to see it first.
I'm fine with that. Like I said, I like the idea of it only being in one place. I like our logo, and I think that a lot of people do recognize it already. Yes, the decent size is important, but taking it off completely makes a sign that's just the words, and I think it's nice to have the logo on there, but it might look awful. So getting a proof of it would be a good plan. A proof of the two ways, one with it at the bottom and one with the logo at the top, if that's a possibility.
Could I take it then that you'd like to amend your motion
To a proof of the two
so
options?
that we bring this back in two forms? One that has only the logo, one that has the logo and Township of Hamilton at the bottom. Both would not have the date,
And both would be version number
and
3.
both would be version number 3, and we would simply compare those two.
So we're back to keeping if we're keeping both, then I can go with what we're at today. I thought that we were talking about why do we want it in both places, Township of Hamilton. And if we're,
I would say bring it back with the logo only,
yeah,
or bring it back like this without the year on it.
Yes, bring back two versions so we can
Bring back
see
two
what they look
versions
like.
to see how it looks.
Yeah, that's
Then-
fair.
okay,
And we choose between the two.
in between the two, and no more argument. Okay.
This has been a long and convoluted process to get us to this point. So you're agreeing to those, making those amendments to your
Yes.
motion? And Mark, you seconded it this time, and you agree as well? Any further discussion? Is everyone clear on what the motion is now then? All right, all in favor? Carried. Unanimously, if that's important.
Pretty good on the sign.
It's really
So,
just a deferral.
where does that leave you, Trevor? You're going to get the two versions, you're going to take it back to Heritage Committee, and
Yeah, I can get the two versions and bring it back to council in July, so that,
Yep.
I was hoping, I want to get it into tender.
Yeah, I understand that.
Installed, so.
is there any way we can get it back faster? How do we do that? Excuse, I'm sorry, Pat, I have a direct question for our CAO.
Sorry, back. We could potentially bring something back with a notice for the special meeting, if we were to add that. Otherwise, we would do it just at the July council meeting.
This would be the meeting we're having at 21.1?
Correct, 21.1, now 21.3, I think we would add that as a third item. If assuming our graphic designer could turn something back to us. So, that'd be the earliest we bring it back, otherwise council in July.
That's better, though. Everyone's okay with that? Think you can get it back? All right. So we'll go to 21.1 when we get there, and we'll add to it when we get there. Is that all right? All right, thank you, Trevor. Boy, it might have been better if I had skipped that one. Corporate Services, a site plan agreement. Need a mover and a seconder. That report, PNG 2019-14, regarding a site plan agreement with Blue Water Enterprises Limited be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. 1, the council approves the site plan for Blue Water Enterprises Limited as per the Site Plan Control Bylaw 93-17, and 2, that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and execute the site plan control agreement with Blue Water Enterprises Limited and return said agreement to the applicant for registration on title and a registered copy to be provided to the municipality prior to the issuance of a building permit. Moved by Pat, seconded by Scott. Discussion. Scott. Excuse me.
To Sandra. Sandra, the site plan that actually gets circulated to us is so small and so much information. It really doesn't exist. Forgive me, but it really doesn't exist. And I've spent enough time trying to understand it, I can quite honestly tell you
Excuse me.
that it didn't work.
Any further questions of Sandra? Right? We have a mover and a second then. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Sandra. 13.2, HR 2019-08. You need a mover and a seconder that report HR 219-08 regarding the overtime and lieu policy be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. 1, that council approves the amendments to the overtime and lieu policy as proposed in the policy attached to report HR 2019-08. Mover and a seconder, please. Pat, seconded by Larry. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Now we need a mover and a seconder that report T 2019-13 regarding mileage rates for employees and members of council be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. 1, the council approves the increase to the mileage rate from 52 cents to 55 cents per kilometer for the use of personal vehicles on approved municipal business, and directs the treasurer to effect this rate increase effective July 1st, 2019. And further, that wording within the Finance Policy 4.02 and Council Policy 4.4 be changed to require a review of the Canada Revenue Agency mileage rates on a yearly basis to determine and implement a blended rate. Moved by Pat, seconded Mark. Thank you. Discussion. Yes, Mark.
Paul, is there any way, rather than have this come back yearly, are you looking at coming up with a formula so that it can be just automatically done and not have to come back to council every time?
Well, that was the intention through Mayor Kane, the intention to change that to the review of the CRA in order to change the policy so that we don't come back.
So you're going to change the policy?
Which is in keeping with more of the lower tier municipalities in Northumberland Township than not.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. I thought that's what you're going to come up with, but I didn't actually
Yeah.
see that wording, but that's fine. Nope, good.
No other questions? I'll call the question then. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Paul. Report T 2019-14. Need a mover and a seconder that report T 2019-14 regarding Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice Act, be received for information. Thanks, Pat. Seconder, Scott. Yes, Pat?
I just wanted to clarify something. So with the self-service stuff being taken out the libraries and I forget something else, parks, the money that's currently sitting in development charges that would go towards libraries is being still, the library still being earmarked for the library?
Yes, through Mayor Kane, that would be correct, Councillor McCourt. Those development charge funds would remain where they are. What we would end up seeing with that moving out of the Development Charge Act and into the Planning Act for those soft services would be collection more in keeping with the Parkland Fund, so the time of severance. Instead, right now we have a set standard rate, but we would look at a couple of changes. One being we would move back towards the 5% ratio, so the 5% of the fair market value of the land, and then the other would be a notice on staff to arrange for the evaluation of the land. So we would see a continuation on, but it would be more in keeping with how we deal with the Parkland Fund now, with that change of having 5% of the value of the land.
And if I may, when does this come in effect for development charges?
It's in effect now.
Is it in effect now?
Yes.
So from now until we get something in place, what happens with your soft service money?
The money that is there currently for development charges for library and for recreation service, outdoor, indoor, and parkland would remain where they are, and they would be used in the spirit of which they've been collected.
I'm thinking if I can't think of the word I want, severance comes through before we get a policy in place for the CB I can't remember all the initials. So we get a severance July 7th.
Yes.
Will there be something in the costs that will cover the percentage for the library and the parks? Or are we in limbo in between, is what I'm trying to ask.
The unfortunate situation is we are in limbo in between, because I am using the term 5%, but I am not saying that is the prescribed amount. It's very unprescribed at this point. It's just, we've just been told that it'll be moved over to the Planning Act, and that we will collect it. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Gibb, and I wish Tim was here, our CBO, to provide a little more information about the timing of collection. But in a similar kind of situation as the Parkland Fund, but what that rate is going to be, they have not determined yet. They've
Right.
already passed to move it to the soft services, but we don't know how much we can collect yet. And we will be kept up to date with information. We'll provide that to council once we receive it.
Okay, and so our committee of adjustment that was last week, was already under the, we're not collecting development charges for those things anymore, right? Like we were in limbo last meeting.
I believe.
When did this come in effect, I guess is
I
the
believe
easier
that
question.
The date that it came into effect was June 7th.
So our June meeting and our July meeting are going to be two. And in theory, maybe we'll have something brought forward for, or so September really too, because we won't okay it before September.
I'd like to be able to say, this is the line in the sand and this is where we move, but there's so many uncertainties on how the bill was passed. Both AMO and our development charge consultants have both provided information saying that so much is yet undetermined, and we're basically being asked to sit in a holding pattern until we get the information from the province.
So if I may, one last question. Our development charges that we're charging right now
Yes.
are the same, even though it's not going to the same place, correct?
As of right now, anything that we've collected up to date is going into the same place. When we pass our bylaw on July the 4th, then we'll hopefully have a little more information as opposed to the soft services. But we're going to end up having to come with a modified bylaw that addresses the uncertainty that we have in the soft services, and then come to then have an amendment to that in, we're guessing, August, September, well, not August, but September. It sounds like a lot of uncertainty, and we're not knowing where we're going, and it is. But the province has not provided the certainty to us.
And just so there's no confusion, I'm not all bothered at your end of this at all.
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure it out in my head because I'm like, it doesn't mesh well. That doesn't.
I think in this case, the province has moved forward with their decision, but they haven't worked out the details.
Okay, thank you.
Can I have one comment?
Sure.
From Mayor Kane? And that is, on page 192 of 284 of the agenda, there's an update from AMO, which provides the policy update, and this is just to support and sort of clarify or update what Paul's treasurer has indicated, and that is on the third paragraph down. It says, and I quote, Bill 108 will require numerous regulations for implementation. Draft regulations generally involve public consultation. AMO will continue to advocate for meaningful municipal involvement in the Bill 108 regulations. So, to the point, we still require those regulations. There will still be typically there is some kind of public discussion, and before those are finalized, AMO wants to be able to participate or provide comment back to the government. And we would continue to collect charges in the interim, according to the bylaw that we have in place or that we'll be passing, and look to an updated one which brings us in compliance with the new act, as probably typically in the fall, as Paul has said.
Yeah, when a bill is passed, it does have regulations that have to be added to them, regardless of whether this bill or any other bill. So those regulations can drag on, it could be months, could be years, depending on how much input they get and how much, like AMO may put more pressure on, who knows? I mean, it's just the way bills work. So you may not be changing our bylaws for, could be next year, could be the year after, depending on when those regulations come down. So even though the bill's passed.
But even with that, if I'm understanding correctly, and if I've got this premise wrong, then I apologize for talking so long. If the regulation hasn't gone through, we're collecting the development charges, and say it takes a year or 2 years, that whole period of time, unless they've put the other thing in place for the libraries, the money for libraries and recreation just doesn't exist, right? We are not in a position to transfer anything that we've collected over to them after the fact, because it's got a new saying this is what your development charges have to be.
I will double check to make sure that that information is correct, and when we come back on the July 4th meeting, that we have proper clarity on
Okay,
that.
because that's what my concern is if it takes a couple of years, then that's 2 years of nothing going to the library. Or, yeah. I'm hoping not.
Any further discussion? Okay, then the motion's calling for us simply to receive this for information, so. I'm sorry, Scott, did you have something?
I got a question on,
Thanks, man.
I want to make sure I'm on top here, make sure it's part of the report. You provided us with a list of the reserves ending. Am I too far ahead to ask a question on that? Yes.
You are.
Thank you. I thought I was, I just didn't want to miss the opportunity.
Yeah, we have the motion already, so we're simply calling for the vote. If there's no further questions, all in favor? Carried. 13.5, reserve transfers. Need a mover and a seconder that report T 2019-15 regarding the 2018 reserves were received, and that the Council of the Township of Hamilton enacts as follows. The Council approves the additional transfers to and from reserves as indicated within report T 2019-15 as a part of the 2018 year-end audit. Moved by Pat, seconded by Scott. Questions? Scott?
As I said a moment ago, there's a, there's a copy of the year-ending reserves for 2018 reserve funds. Is that a complete list?
It is a complete list.
Nothing missing from that?
No.
Thank you.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Paul?
I just wanted to, if I could, Mayor Kane,
Yeah.
just quickly talk about the extra reserve activities that were
Yes.
outside of the budget
thought
that
you
are
did.
on page 2. We had a couple of activities there that are just some operational where we wanted to defer some work forward, as well as try and capture a little bit of overall general savings within various departments to hit those reserves. I know there's been a lot of direction expressed by council that we want to build up our reserves and try and get to the point where we're putting more into reserves than what we're actually using. So we took a few pieces of our savings, netted that against some extra expenses or uses of reserves that we had, like the winter maintenance reserve, which is part of our policy going forward and past practice, but also the use of roads development charges for the $309,000. I know that Richard talked on that as well. So those are the extra amounts that we need to get a resolution by council to accept, to move forward, to finalize the statements with the auditors. But one thing I did want to point out is on the very last page, when you look at the reserves, on the left, we've got 5.457 million is what we started in. With all of the capital work that we did, with all the transfers in, with the extra reserve transfers that we did, and the extra uses of reserves that are outside of the budget, as you shoot over to the right there, we come out at 5.543 million at the end of the year, which means in 2018 we actually put in $86,471 into reserves, more than what we spent. So I think that was a piece of good news that we're on the right track and heading forward with that strategic direction.
Right. Yes, Scott?
However, as we move forward into future years, we're not showing that type of positive growth in our reserves. In fact, we'll be depleting our reserves in several different departments.
If you look at, yes, through Councillor Kane, Mayor Kane,
Sorry.
When you look at it and isolate it within very specific reserves, yes, absolutely right. But the goal of council, the goal of staff with council's direction is to make sure that overall we're heading in a positive direction. Speaking specifically for fire and public works, vehicle and equipment reserve would probably be the most obvious one to pick on with that. But hopefully we bring back the information to show that while those ones are dipping down and will stay down before they come back up, that overall we'll be looking at reserves building them back up. And we'll also look at some methods or some strategies to mitigate that risk, which I believe it was a year or two before we got too far into that. So we're going to see what we can do to try and turn that corner and keep our heads above the water as much as we can. But I do anticipate and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to bring back a similar report next year of overall reserves, looking at them all together, that will be increasing on our reserves.
Thank you, but I will tell you that this council member will be looking at individual departments as well as the overall, and in particular roads and fire, because they are our two biggest departments within the organization, and they are showing the biggest depletion of reserves of any department. That's my summary. Thanks.
Anyone else? All right, then we have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that's carried. So 13, thank you, Paul. 13.6, property standards. Mover and a seconder that report CD 2019-15 regarding committee appointments be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamblin enacts as follows. The council approve the following as members of the Property Standards Appeal Committee: John Davidson, Bruce Butter, Don Sandercock. And fence viewers, Alan Cole, Bruce Butter, Don Sandercock. And further, that the appointment bylaws be brought forward to council for consideration. Moved by Mark, seconded by Pat. Discussion? Relief by our clerk. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Kate, for all your work there. 13.7, report CD 2019-16. We need a mover and a seconder that report CD 2019-16 regarding the Joint Municipal Election Compliance Audit Committee procedures be received, and that the council of the Township of Hamblin acts as follows. The council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to amend bylaw 2018-45, being a bylaw to establish a joint municipal election compliance audit committee to append meeting procedures that will provide a quick reference tool during the compliance audit committee meetings. Got it out. Mover, please.
Pardon?
Moved by Larry. Seconded by Pat. Discussion. Yes, Pat.
I just don't completely understand what this is saying. So could you just say it in different words?
Sure. Okay, so we previously passed a bylaw a year ago to establish a joint municipal election compliance committee. It set out the roles and responsibilities of the members, but there was a reference to the municipal procedural bylaw, which is mostly around council. So then you've got two documents if you have to have a session with, if there's a request to appeal. So the training session that our lead municipality, because we did this as a joint venture, so all municipalities in Northumberland County passed the same bylaw, and our lead is the municipality of Port Hope. When we went to the training session, it was highly recommended that our bylaw that deals specifically with the compliance audit committee have its own procedures with its bylaw. So that's all, we're just simplifying the process and making it a tight package.
That makes sense to me. I remembered when it first came forward last year, I'm like, it sounds like we're doing kind of the same thing again. I couldn't figure out what the difference
It's
was.
the procedures aspect of it, so all the municipalities are doing the same thing.
Thank you, Kate.
Further questions from council members? All in favor of the motion? Carried. Report CAO 2019-05. Need a mover and a seconder. The report CAO 2019-05 regarding off-road vehicle use on municipal roadways, Bill 107, and that the Council of Township of Hamlin acts as follows. The council directs staff to prepare a bylaw to prohibit the use of ATVs and related off-road vehicles on municipal roadways to reflect our current practice in the township. Mover, Scott. Seconder, Larry. Discussion. Pat.
Okay, I have lots of discussion for this one.
Yes, I have some too.
So, first of all, to me, it was very different when we were not putting into place a bylaw that kept ATVs off the road, or that didn't allow ATVs on the road, to this, which is absolutely the opposite. It said in the report about no financial impacts, and I'd really like clarification on that, because right now the OPP enforces this because it's part of the Highway Traffic Act. The Traffic Act's now going to say that they are allowed, and we're putting in a bylaw. So does that mean, like parking, that we have to enforce it? So that's my one question. And if we have to enforce it, do we do it through our bylaw enforcement people, or are we paying extra to the OPP? My second thing is that if the county is not doing the same bylaw, then the ATVs can be on the county roads in our township and not on the side roads. And that, to me, is my own version of, oh my goodness, that's just not a reasonable thing to put on people. I also know that we've had the ATV club here a number of times asking for us to consider this. So to me, the minimum we should be doing, if this gets, what is it, still missing proclamation? If the, is that we give it a 3-month trial to see if our ATV complaints go up. Because right now, we have all the stuff in place that we're hoping is going to stop the ATVers from doing the jerky things that they sometimes do, and they're doing them anyway. I have no belief that leaving this just the way it is going to increase the bad things happening. And I'd like some showing that that's going to happen. So I'd like to see us doing nothing right now. I know that's not what I voted for, because I'm concerned about, I wanted to get it on the floor, but I'm concerned about the costs, and I'm concerned about the enforcement. But even without those issues, I think we should be giving it a trial period.
I just want to speak again on the bill. The bill itself has just been passed. The regulations to the bill have not been passed yet. So we don't know what the government's going to come down with as far as the regulation part of it goes. So at this point, we almost have to do nothing, because if we pass bylaws, I mean, we want to make sure that we're passing the bylaws correctly. Because right now, does that include side-by-sides? Does that include where they're, we don't know where they're going to run on the road, and so forth and so forth. Even speed limit. I mean, there's certain vehicles that go 30 mile an hour, and there's certain vehicles that can go 80 mile an hour. Are they going to enforce stuff like that? So at this point, I think we're a little premature to do anything until those regulations come down, other than perhaps support AMO on its decision, which is to leave things basically the way they are and let municipalities decide on their own. So that's what AMO is doing. But as far as the province goes, they're listening to that, and they're listening to input on it. But at this point, they haven't made those regulations to say whether ATVs are going to be, whether that's going to change or not change, and how it's going to change. So we don't know that at this point.
So the bill has been passed, and the word is already out there. We had an ATV go flying up Ontario Street yesterday, and I don't know if I've ever seen one there before. So it's not taking long for the word to get out, even though the changes are not supposed to come into effect for about a year to a year and a half. Bylaw enforcement is not the OPP's choice. They very much do not want to enforce bylaws. We've had the same issue with our noise bylaw, for example. They would much rather enforce Ontario statutes. I think we need, my personal opinion on this one is, I believe we need to concentrate our efforts on trying to persuade agreeing with AMO and trying to pass a resolution to persuade our MPP and the provincial government to take another look at this particular section of Bill 107. And in particular, they really need to consult OPP, who is, obviously they're policing, the provincial policing agency. They are very much not in favor of this part of the bill. They do not want to enforce bylaws. As a matter of fact, they probably won't enforce bylaws. They're just too much trouble for them. As a stopgap measure, I get this idea that we're trying to do something because the word is already out there. My own personal opinion is we need to do even more than this. We really need to push. I personally would like to direct our staff to come up with a resolution that we can send to our MPP and to the our provincial government, asking them again, like as I said, to take a much closer look at this, to consult with their own policing agency. And hopefully if we get that resolution out there, we'll get support from other municipalities that have ATV rules, or I should say, have not passed rules to allow them on the roads because they don't want them there. So I don't know where that leaves us with this particular motion, but again, I'd like to see us to do even more than this. Any more discussion? Larry?
The only concern that I have is that if the province passes, which they have this bill, are they going to take the liability issue? Or are we stuck with liability if there's an accident, for instance, a soft shoulder gives way on one of the, soft shoulders? Because, as you said, Mark, there's a lot of issues that are going to play into it. But liability, AMO even indicates in their document that the insurance companies are totally against this, bill, because it puts us at risk, totally at risk. So I agree with you that we should pass a resolution that we don't agree with this.
As our treasurer mentioned earlier, this particular government is passing legislation without a lot of forethought, and this is another, to me, a perfect example where they just simply haven't allowed enough thinking to happen before they passed an act. I don't think it's too late. I will say this about the provincial government: they have backtracked on several things already when they've got enough information from the public, and they're advertising themselves as the government that listens to the people. So, I think we need to try to make them listen. I agree that we have two people on board for a resolution. Yes, Scott.
My comments are several in nature. First of all, each and every one of us, with the exception of Council Member Larry, heard a presentation. I don't think you were present. You may have been in the audience. But we heard a presentation from our insurance carrier. And it was very clear. And I don't think we should forget that. In addition to that, these vehicles are going to be, I believe, defined as motor vehicles under the Highway Traffic Act. The same as a motorcycle is, the same as a car is. And as far as enforcement's concerned, we pass bylaws for speed limits and those types of things that the police enforce. And I think we're going to find that it unfolds in the exact same manner. It's going to have to. Whether it starts out that way or not, we don't know, but it's going to have to. The police are going to have to enforce the regulations on the road. And in this particular case, it may be that of a bylaw prohibiting them in the future. I personally am split on the topic. I have an SUV side-by-side, and not SUV, ATV side-by-side. And I also have property that's destroyed because of people that leave the roads and go onto private property. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's any direct connection, but if the police don't have an opportunity to stop and question ATVs on the road, then I think that is, or potentially, a contributing factor for more ATVs on the road and more damage to private property. I do make that link. I am not in any way wanting ATVs on our roads at this point in time, and I'm not willing to support a motion that we defer this other than bring forward a council report saying that we should be stopping it immediately. In the interim, the best thing to do is stop it. We can adjust our bylaw in the future.
One of the problems I see with bylaws, since no one else has got their hand up, is each municipality will pass their own and they won't be the same. The police could easily be trying to enforce 4 or 5 different bylaws in Northumberland County. What's the set fine? You don't have one. What's the procedure for disagreeing with a charge? Do you have to, are we going to be wind up paying court time to police officers going in to defend our bylaws? Yes, we are. Again, I don't believe a bylaw is enough. I think we really need to push to try and get this to remain in the Highway Traffic Act. Yes, Pat.
I'm trying to get all my thoughts straight in my head. So, like I said previously, I look at our neighboring municipalities who allow ATVs, and I personally still am of the mind that it's time for us to let this one go. Having said that, the thought of it being enforced by bylaw terrifies me. And it's like I said, especially if the county bylaw doesn't match the municipal bylaw. And right now, when you look at the county bylaw, they have sections of road where they've said, yes, you can have ATVs, yes, you cannot. And I'm not sure how, no, you cannot. I'm not sure.
They don't have any bylaw that says you cannot. They have some bylaws
Okay,
that
sorry.
allow some roads in lower tiers.
The actual Highway Traffic Act says you cannot. That was
Yes.
my miswording. But it's specific, and when I looked at it, I don't know that it does all the county roads in the municipality that allows it. So I'm thinking that's already complicated for the police. With this in as well, I think that the chance of it being enforced properly is going to be very, very difficult. So although I'm not in agreement of ATVs, I have no problem supporting that AMO try and get a better handle on the legislation.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm in agreement with that, Pat, 100%. I mean, we can't, for us to try and look after bylaws, it would be just disastrous. I mean, you talk about liability. Wait till you have somebody that says, hey, we have ATVs, they just destroyed my property, they were on your roads and your bylaw didn't protect them. You want to see liability come through, they'll be suing us because they had damage done. That'll be the next thing. So right now, I think we have to get a report from staff that supports basically what AMO's supporting and go that direction and hit our MPP as much as we can. That's all we really can do, and perhaps even invite him to a meeting and have a good report for him that he can, take our side hopefully on this. But to put bylaws out there, I think it's just, we'd have to have signage on every road saying no ATVs.
I don't think the bylaw is enough. I think it'll be very, very difficult to get the police interested in enforcing it. I know how they feel about bylaws. They just don't want any part of them.
And I know we've been at the police service board meeting, and they don't even like to try and run after if they do see some infraction with an ATV, because I mean, it could probably cause more damage or probably cause harm to themselves even.
Well, they have a standing operating procedure that they are not to chase ATVs. They don't. So, yeah. Arthur, did you want to jump in now?
If I may, through you, Mayor Kane, the purpose of this report was to bring up the issue that they did pass Bill 107 all within the course of a month, from May through to conclusion in June. But we were aware that while it received royal assent, this provision of the bill, now Act, will only come into effect on a date that's proclaimed by the minister. So we know there's still some time, although the word is out. Other people believe that it's in place
I
now.
believe it's 1.5 years for this one, I think. That's what I heard.
And that's great information. If it's that'll give us some time. There's no deadline. So it could be sooner, it could be longer. So the intent was to at least say, if we don't want, if council does no longer want to regulate ATVs, we won't do anything, and we'll let the act come in and the regulations. However, if council was concerned that we need a bylaw, we need some kind of direction. So what I'm getting from council is to bring back a report, to include additional information that we can on the impacts of it, if the regulations are developed, or the process that's occurring through that. To also send a resolution to our local MPP, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Transportation, as well as perhaps the Premier, County of Northumberland Municipalities, and AMO, indicating our concern with the bill. And at some point, whether it's at AMO in the summer, or either inviting our local MPP, Mr. Piccini, to a council meeting to talk to him about this issue as well. That could be a third piece, to have that direct interaction with him as well. I'd say the last piece is we should perhaps, with council agreement, issue a communique or put information on our website that the prohibition of ATVs still continues to exist in the township of Hamilton.
And I believe that the county frequently has delegations at conferences like AMO. And county's going to be on side with our municipality, I believe, because they don't want ATVs on the county roads any more than we want them on ours. So there's a good chance that, you know, I could maybe try to lobby myself into a position where I could be a part of a presentation. I wasn't planning on going to AMO, but if there, you know, I would go for a day if I thought I had an opportunity to be part of a lobby group who got to speak about this particular aspect of Bill 107. So I'll start working on that right away. So if I could just ask, where are we now with this motion? Are we looking at that passing this bylaw is not really what we want to do right now? We're waiting for more information. I really want you to come forward with a resolution. I think that's vitally important.
I would just add the Attorney General also, and the OPP,
Yes.
so that you,
OPP.
this really comes under the guise of the Attorney General, you know.
So I'm back to what we do. Are we ready to call a vote on this motion?
Just accepting the information.
Yes, Scott?
Could I have clarity on one thing?
Yes.
Arthur, the status quo remains until,
Yes.
is what I hear you saying.
Yes, it's about a year and a half. isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Until, just to clarify, until the day proclamation by the government.
We have no idea when that will be, but
No,
until.
and again, I think you've heard through the council members, Mayor Kane and Councillor Lovshin were at a recent police board services meeting. But my information from AMO says that it could occur sooner as well. So they just know that it was a fast bill. There's a number of provisions that are going to be still proclaimed. And my concern was to be prepared for that date, and was bringing it forward to council in that light.
I wonder if we could entertain a amendment to the motion, rather than direct staff to prepare the bylaw, but to prepare a report to council and a resolution which Arthur just spoke of. If that's a totally different one, then we can simply vote on the bylaw, and then if it's defeated, we'll bring another motion forward. Is that the best plan? Any more discussion then before we vote on the bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? And so that motion is defeated. I would like to entertain another motion, please. Yes, Mark?
Yeah, I'll make the motion that staff be directed to bring a report back to council in support of basically what AMO's doing in their supports, and perhaps at that point, I don't know whether we want to go above and beyond that at this point, because I mean, I would like to see that report before we go and recommend it to MPs and or MPP and so forth. So it'd be nice to just get the staff report. So I think I'll just stop it there.
Don't want to have a resolution drawn up that we can...
With the resolution drawn up, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. So that would be part of the report. But after that, I think we'd leave it until.
To me, that's the most vital part of the report, so that we Okay, so that's a mover. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Yes, Larry. Any discussion further? Yes, Pat?
So when you're asking for a staff report, all that's going to be, all that you're asking for in that is to make sure we're clear on Amos' stand, so that, and then the resolution to go with, yes, we support Amos.
That's correct.
That's the step we're at right now?
That's correct, so that we have enough that we can invite her, if we choose to invite our MPP here and do a delegation and so forth, we can do that at that time, but we do need to know what the staff report looks like first.
I just wasn't clear as to what the staff were reporting on, but I'm good now, thank you.
Are we good? Okay, all in favor of the new motion? It's carried. Thank you, council, for your input. No emergency services reports. 15, communications and announcements. We have 7 resolutions and announcements. Could we have one motion, please, to accept all that correspondence received as information, and then if we have something specific, we'll draw it out for discussion? So, a mover, yes, Mark, seconded by Larry. All in favor? That's carried. Anything from 15.1 to 15.7 that you'd like to have discussed? Pat?
Sorry, 15.3.
3?
Yeah, this, I really would like us to support this. There's a push for 4 courses before graduation from high school to be done online, so that you can graduate. First of all, we have issues with rural internet. I know my internet's still off and on, so trying to do any of that online if it's from home is going to be difficult. But my bigger issue with it, working with children, is that you have kids that cannot learn that way. And we're putting, if this goes in as you have to have 4 online credits, you're going to be limiting some kids from graduating from high school. And that very much concerns me.
So you're supporting the reconsideration of this, okay? Okay. Yes, Larry? In favor? So are we all in favor then of supporting 15.3, a resolution to reconsider e-learning? All in favor? And that's carried. Go ahead, Larry. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have something else, 15.1 to 15.7?
Yeah, regarding resolutions to Bill 108, I see there's a number of communications from various townships and towns. We brought that up at one of the council meetings prior. Did we actually put forward a resolution on that? I don't think we did. Could be.
I can't honestly tell
It
you.
seems that everybody's pretty upset about it.
I know we did discuss it, but I don't recall if we supported a motion or not. I think we did. Yeah, okay.
That was not long.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. We'll check that up and
I
give.
think it's been well documented.
Okay.
We're all against it.
Anything else from 15.1 through 15.7? All right. 16.1, bylaw 2019-39. Mover and a seconder, please, that bylaw 2019-39 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and execute an agreement with Drain Brothers Excavating Limited for the provision of paving and drainage improvements of various roads within Hamilton Township under tender number PW 2019-04 at a value of $910,130 plus HST, be given first, second, and third reading and finally passed this 18th day of June. Moved by Scott, seconded by Pat. Discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Bylaw 2019-40. Mover and a seconder that bylaw 2019-40, being a bylaw to appoint members to the Property Standards Appeal Committee, be given first, second, and third reading and passed this 18th day of June, 2019. Mover by Pat, seconded by Mark. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. 16.3, mover and a seconder, please, that bylaw 2019-41 be given, being a bylaw to appoint members as fence viewers for the Township of Hamilton, be given first, second, and third reading, and finally passed this 18th day of June. Moved Scott, seconded Larry. Discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry I'd missed that. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. 16.4, mover and a seconder that bylaw 2019-42 be given, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and execute a site plan control agreement with Blue Water Enterprises Limited for the development of the site in accordance with approved minor variance A 12-18, be given first, second, and third reading, and finally passed this 18th day of June, 2019. Moved by Pat, seconded by Scott. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. 16.5. Mover and a seconder, please, that bylaw 2019-43, being a bylaw to reduce the speed of traffic on Sutter Creek Drive to 50 kilometers per hour, and to direct staff to erect the appropriate signage, be given first, second, and third reading, and finally pass this 18th day of June, 2019. Moved by Pat, seconded by Larry. Discussion. All in favor? That's carried. 16.6, a mover and a seconder, that bylaw 2019-45, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2018-45, the establishment of a joint municipal election committee compliance audit committee to append procedures to the bylaw, be given first, second, and third reading, and finally pass this 18th day of June, 2019. Moved by Pat, seconded by Mark. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Notice of motions? None. Media questions and agendas, on the agenda topics only. None. Thank you. Thank you for being here. No closed sessions. So 21.1, special council meeting, July 4th at 10 a.m. So these are notices required. That council meeting agenda will include a development charges bylaw, number 1. Number 2, a discussion on the Dennis subdivision agreement. And we've now added number 3, Hamlet signs. Do we need a motion for that? Or just, we have made an announcement? It's been announced for all to see. Okay. 22, a confirmatory bylaw. Mover and a seconder that bylaw 2019-44, being a bylaw to adopt the proceedings of the regular council meeting of June 18, 2019, and to authorize its execution, be given a first, second, and third reading, and finally pass this 18th day of June, 2019. Moved by Scott, seconded Pat. All in favor? Carried. I will also entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Scott, seconded by Larry, that the regular council meeting held June 18, 2019 be adjourned at 2:40. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, council, for your involvement, and staff.